Hello again, and welcome to the last of the basic Vivien tutorials. We'll start almost right where we left off in Lesson 7. I said almost because, as you can see, the appearance of the objects we've added in Lesson 7 was altered. In addition to this, the following items have been added to the file. 2 3-foot stairs leading up to the first tier of the stage, a 2-foot stair leading to the second tier, a chair behind the tables on the stage, a dining table, some people objects, a bar in the bottom left corner of the room, a cylinder in place of a low table, and a riser next to it in place of a low stool. All of this was done by using the techniques discussed in Lessons 6 and 7. So if you would like to do the same with your file from Lesson 7 so you can follow along, please go ahead. In this final lesson, we will take a look at basic object manipulations such as copying and pasting, moving and rotating, and a few other functions designed to improve your efficiency and overall workflow while using Vivien. Let's start with copying and pasting. One way to copy one or more objects, the easiest way, is freehand. Simply select one or more objects, right-click to copy or press Ctrl and C, right-click again to paste or press Ctrl and V, and then click to indicate where the copy should be placed. While freehand copying and pasting has its uses, it is not precise, so drawing aids such as snaps and ortho may be used to assist with this task. For example, proceed as follows to copy the balloons from the back corner of the stage and paste them precisely at the front corner. Switch to isometric view. Select the object, copy it, paste, and then use the snapping technique that you learned in Lesson 7 to place the balloons at the front corner. Back in Plan View, we want to copy the bar to the other side of the room, ensuring that the copy maintains the same distance from the front wall of the room as the original. To do this, enable X Ortho. Copy and paste. Note that while Ortho was off, you were able to move the pasted object anywhere within the diagram, but now you are only able to move it horizontally due to the X Ortho constraint. Move the cursor towards the other side of the room. Click to place the copy, and then repeat the same with the low table and stool at the same time. In addition to pasting an object by simply clicking the mouse, it's also possible to specify a coordinate at which to place the copy. To do this, after you've selected, copied, and pasted an object, instead of clicking, simply type the coordinate at which to place it, and then press Enter. It's important to note that the ortho state is ignored when a coordinate is entered. As you can see here, even though X ortho was enabled, the copied object's placement was not constrained by this. The new table did end up in the middle of the dance floor, but don't worry, we'll move it away from there shortly. The most important thing to remember regarding the copy and paste function is that unless the height at which to insert a pasted object is specified by typing the coordinate, or unless ortho is enabled, that object will be inserted at the height or Z coordinate that appears in the status bar. So far, our height has been 0, so let's change it to 2 feet and see how this works. First, since ortho is still enabled, copying and pasting an object will not change the copy's height. After disabling ortho, however, doing the same thing will result in the person being placed 2 feet in the air. Since we can't have people floating in the air, we will undo this by pressing Ctrl and Z, and as a result, the pasted object will disappear. A quick copy function is also available, which doesn't require any commands. Simply select one or more objects, hold down the Ctrl key, move the cursor close to the object until a rectangle appears around the cursor's tail, click and drag the object to make the copy, and release the mouse button to place it. Note that quick copy does not respect the specified height. In other words, objects copied and pasted in this manner will always end up at the same height as the original object. Moving one or more objects is another useful and much used function in Vivien. To perform a simple or freehand move, select an object, bring the cursor close to it until the same rectangle as before appears around the cursor's tail, click and drag the object to the desired location, and release the mouse button to leave it there. Note that when objects are moved this way, their original height is always maintained, regardless of ortho state. Naturally though, if ortho is enabled, the move will be constrained to the active ortho axes. Besides freehand, Vivien has two other move operations, absolute and relative. An absolute move, which is the less common of the two, requires the selection of a point from which the object is to be moved, also known as the base point of the move, and specifying the point at which it will end up, or the end point of the move. To perform an absolute move, select the object and activate the Move command from the Modify menu or by pressing Ctrl and M. Next, Vivien prompts you to select the base point, which you can do by clicking or by typing a coordinate and pressing Enter. Alternately, you may simply press Enter without typing anything to indicate that you wish to pick up the object by its insertion point. This is the most common base point selection method, so that is what I have done here. The object is now attached to the cursor, and you may either click to place it or type the coordinate at which to place it. In this case, I want to move the table off to a specific coordinate, so I will enter this coordinate and press Enter. Note that freehand and absolute moves may be used in conjunction with snaps in order to make placement easier and more accurate. The more common relative move does not require the selection of a base point. Instead, the selected objects are simply moved by a specified distance along each axis. To perform a relative move, after selecting one or more objects and pressing Ctrl M, do not click or press Enter. All you need to do instead is tell Vivien how far along each axis you wish to move the objects. I will demonstrate this by moving the dance floor up by 1 mm in order to remove the Z-fighting artifact. The Z-fighting is a normal artifact in 3D visualization. It's caused by two surfaces sharing the exact same space along an axis, which creates a flickering effect like the one showing here with the dance floor and the venue's floor. Start by selecting the dance floor, press Ctrl M to activate the Move command, and type the @ symbol, again without clicking or pressing Enter. Follow this by a 0 and a comma, because you do not want to move the dance floor on the x-axis. Another 0 and comma because you do not want to move the dance floor on the y-axis. And 1 mm because the object is to be moved by 1 mm up on the z-axis. Finish the relative move by pressing Enter. While you will likely not notice any change in the wireframe after moving the dance floor such a small distance, the artifact no longer appears in the shaded view, so the move has completed successfully. Next, we will move the dance floor 4 feet towards the front of the room, in order to accommodate the stairs which were placed at the front of the stage. To do this, select the dance floor once more, press Ctrl M, type the @ symbol followed by 0, a comma, 4 feet, another comma, a 0, and press Enter. Relative move coordinates may of course be combined in order to move objects along multiple axes at once and in order to avoid having to perform multiple moves. For example, we will now move the copied table from its incorrect place in the center of the room 16 feet on the negative x-axis and 14 feet on the negative y-axis. Much like when drawing linear objects by specifying their length and angle as we learned in Lesson 7, it is also possible to move objects in this manner. For example, to move the podium 8 feet towards the left of the room, select it, activate Move, type @ followed by the distance to move it by, type an open triangle bracket, followed by the angle at which to move it, and press Enter. Rotation is another common and very useful basic object manipulation function in Vivien. Rotating an object involves setting a point around which to rotate it, or the base point for the rotation, and then specifying a rotation angle. Just like moving, the simplest type of rotation is freehand. Select the object, select Rotate from the Modify menu or press Ctrl R, and press Enter to make its insertion point the base point for the rotation. The object becomes attached to the cursor, so you can rotate it at will. Once the desired angle is reached, simply click and the object will remain in that position. Another way to perform a freehand rotation is with Quick Rotate. Select the object, hover the cursor close to it until the square appears around the cursor's tail. Hold down the Alt key, click and drag until the desired angle is reached, and release the mouse button. A quick rotation can only be performed around the object's insertion point, and an exact rotation angle cannot be set for it, but in many cases that is sufficient. Note that if ortho is enabled, both freehand and quick rotations will be constrained by the ortho axes, and therefore you will only be able to rotate by 90, 180, or 270 degree angles. When an exact rotation angle is required, the number of degrees must be supplied. To do this, select the object, activate Rotate, and set the base point. But instead of clicking to finish the rotation, type the desired angle and press Enter. While most rotations are performed around the object's insertion point, this is not always the case, and there will be times when the object will need to be rotated around another of its points. It is, of course, possible to click or type coordinates in order to set that point. It is by far easier and more efficient to use snaps for this purpose. For example, to decrease the angle of the two diagonal pipe and drape sections behind the stage by 10 degrees each, ensure that endpoint snap is enabled. Select the right section and activate Rotate. Now, instead of pressing Enter to select this object's insertion point, move the cursor close to the end that's connected to the straight section. Wait for it to snap into place. Click, type 10, and then press Enter. Repeat this for the left section, but use -10 for the angle. It is also possible to rotate an object around a point that doesn't belong to it. Such a point may be clicked, specified by coordinate, or snapped to. For example, to rotate the low stool around the low table while maintaining its distance from the table, enable Center Snap. Select the stool on the right and activate Rotate. Next, hover the cursor around the center of the low table until it snaps into place. Click once it does, and then rotate it freehand or enter a rotation angle. Should you ever need to rotate multiple objects at the same time around their insertion points by the same number of degrees, you may use the Rotate in Place command. A perfect example of this is the two stairs at the back of the stage, which are facing the wrong way. After selecting them, activate Rotate in Place via the Modify menu or by pressing Ctrl, Shift, and R. Base points for Rotate in Place may only be set as the object's insertion points, so click anywhere and then either freehand rotate and click to finish, or enter the desired rotation angle and press Enter. In this case, we will enter 90 and press Enter to get the precise rotation. Once the rotation is complete, manually adjust the position of the stairs as needed. While not as common as the previous functions, Vivien's Mirror tool allows you to create a mirror image of most objects that have been inserted into the file. Its most common use is to mirror objects across a venue's center line, in order to avoid having to draw symmetrical elements on both sides of the room. For example, since we require stairs at the back of the other side of the stage as well, we can simply mirror the ones that we have instead of inserting new ones from the library and then rotating them. To do this, select the two stairs at the back of the stage, activate Mirror from the Modify menu, or press Ctrl and W. Enable Midpoint Snap, and click the middle of the room's front wall to set the start point of the mirroring line. To set the second point of the mirroring line, enable Midpoint Snap once more, snap, and click the middle point of the front of the stage. Once the second point is set, the mirror command completes automatically, and the stairs appear in the correct orientation on the other side of the stage. Note that midpoint snap was used in order to ensure that the mirroring line matches the room's center line. Cloning provides a means to create multiple copies of an object at once. So in many cases, this may be a more efficient option than copying and pasting multiple times. For example, with a linear clone, you can easily add the necessary chairs behind the tables on the stage. Select the single chair that was inserted, click the Modify menu, select Clone, and then Linear. Vivien now asks you to set the distance and the direction in which to create the additional copies of the selected object. Activate Ortho for X to ensure that the copies will be created in a perfectly straight line, and then click anywhere to the right of the chair. Note that if you wish, you can also type the exact distance and angle, just like when drawing a line. A window now appears which asks you to specify the rest of the clone operation's details. For the purposes of this lesson, we will leave everything as is except for the number of items, which we will set to 14, and the interval, which will be 1 foot 9 inches. Once done, click OK to have another 13 chairs appear instantly behind the tables. If they do not line up with the ends of the tables quite properly, simply select them all and click and drag to freehand move them to the correct position. A polar clone allows you to create multiple copies of a selected object in a circular pattern. Using this tool, you can add additional stools around the low tables at the back of the room much easier than by copying and pasting them, and then rotating each. Before you begin, ensure that Ortho is disabled, since in almost all cases, Ortho is not required for a polar clone. Next, select the stool on the left, activate Polar Clone, and click to set the center of the circle that the new objects will create by center snapping to the center of the low table. In the dialog that appears, specify the number of items to create, which is 6, including the original stool. Specify the angle to fill, which is 360 for a full circle. Leave the Rotate Object option enabled and click OK. The additional stools appear around the table, each rotated to face the table. On the other side of the room, a total of only 4 stools are required, and they do not need to form a full circle around the table. Where the linear clone tool allows you to create multiple copies of an item in a single direction, Grid Clone does the same but in 2 directions at once by specifying rows and columns. Here it is being used to add tables to this event. I encourage you to explore these tools in depth by reading more about them in the user's guide, as they can greatly improve your efficiency when using Vivien. Next, Vivien's alignment tools are invaluable when you need to ensure that objects in your diagram appear neat and organized. This is especially true for objects that have been placed manually, as we did with the tables on the stage. The alignment tools are best accessed from the alignment toolbar in Drawing Wireframe. So if this toolbar is not enabled for you, please enable it now. To fix the table's positions, select them, ensure that the Extents option is enabled on the alignment toolbar, and then click Center vertically to have them line up perfectly. This is just one of the many ways in which the alignment tools can be used to fix imperfections in your diagram. Explore them further on your own and with the help of the Vivien User's Guide. Last but not least, grouping objects into a single item or entity is another very useful option that can come in handy in more complex files which contain larger amounts of objects. 2 important things to understand about groups are that they are entities unto themselves, and that they can exist on a layer that's different than the layer or layers of their component objects. Therefore, care must be taken when a group is created, as it will always be created on the current layer, regardless of what layers the objects that are to be grouped belong to. While this is not required, it is strongly recommended that only objects belonging to the same layer are grouped, and that the same layer is current when the group is created. Creating a group is very simple. Ensure that the layer for the objects you're about to group is current. Select the objects you wish to include in the group, and select Group from the Modify menu, or simply press Ctrl-G. Now that these objects are grouped, clicking any one of them will select them all, and any operations, such as copying and pasting, moving, rotating, and so on will be performed on the entire group. If you no longer wish to keep a certain set of objects grouped, simply select their group and press Ctrl and U, or select Ungroup from the Modify menu. This brings us to the end of the basic Vivien tutorials. Using the knowledge you've gathered here, you'll be able to use Vivien to successfully design events and create the corresponding diagrams. I encourage you to continue beyond these lessons, not only by practicing what you've learned so far, but also by exploring Vivien's other features, especially the wizards, on your own. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again soon for the Intermediate Tutorial Series.